Hello and welcome to the greatest MMA channel of all time. My name is Andrew and I will be your host for the inaugural episode. I will explain to you the tongue-in-cheek nature, a bit more about myself, and a bit more about this station in the near future, including why I started it so quickly and so low budget, because we were coming up on this Israel Adesanya and Jan Blachowicz fight, and I absolutely had to analyze the body language and bring it to you guys, because I think Jan is the biggest person that they have slept on, like their biggest possibility that people have been sleeping on as far as a title shot upset possibility in quite a long time, probably since like Cejudo beat Demetrius Johnson or something on those lines. I think that was an 18-1. Not going to be quite that, but just the attitudes a lot of people are having, they're really, really looking past him. And I want to take a look at this body language of the face-off, sort of in isolation from everything else. I do have a lot of thoughts about all the other stuff that's been happening. I hope to bring you that and a lot more in a lot of future videos, including comedy, etc. But for now, let us get to this body language. So we are starting with the stage. They're getting ready to walk up for the face-off, and you've got Dana White, looks in one direction, fixes his pants, looks in the other direction, smiles a bit at Izzy, looks back, licks his lips. Israel is walking up. Now you notice his hands are kind of holding his jacket and pushing it back. He was doing that a lot. He was sort of flailing around with his jacket. You'll notice he does that throughout. And in some places, he seems to do it to like try to look like Mr. Cool Cat. In other places, it tends to look a bit like nervous behavior. So we'll see exactly what that is. But you see, Dana White is directly making eye contact with him, and he definitely has his typical face-off smirk going on his face. So Israel steps up. He's flipping his jacket back, and now he's moving his hands to the front. And what I've noticed, he steps up and then he crosses his hands in front of his body while he's keeping his head up a little bit, and fairly straight, but definitely not down and not necessarily submissive that way. But he is putting his hands in front of his body, which is what people do to try to protect themselves and close themselves off. So he gets there first, and he's standing there, and he's sort of like in a dominant position, but he's got his hands in front of his body, putting something else in between Jan, who he knows is going to be approaching, and his body. So he's shifting around a little bit again, side to side, and here comes Jan. And as Jan is coming up on stage, you notice he's looking down at the ground. Now, whether or not this is just a normal thing that he does for face-offs, whether he does this normally at face-offs because he has this routinized, who knows what's going on in his head, but usually the aversion of the eyes is a sign of, I don't want to look at you for whatever reason. So as he's approaching, he's not approaching making the eye contact. His eyes are down on the ground, something important to note. So he comes in a bit further, and as he comes in, when he steps the final step, his eyes go straight up to meet Adesanya without hesitation, walks in and right up there, and now they're looking at each other. And you can see he immediately gets this relatively serious look on his face. Adesanya seems to have the same look that he's had. His arms are still kind of in front of him, and I'm using the screenshots obviously so I don't get copyrighted. These particular screenshots are from the Mac Life. There are some that are better. There are some that are worse, depending on the angle, depending on what you can hear in the video. You can see people's facial expressions a lot more. And what's going on here, there's this person way in the back. I hope you'll be able to see the cursor that is essentially has the little camera in her hand, and that video's up too, and that gives you a very good look of Israel's face. And as they're looking at each other here, his eyes move around and they're kind of scanning a little bit around Jan's face while semi maintaining the eye contact. That's a good video to look at to get a very direct look at Adesanya's face. In the future, I'm going to try to have an additional screen interposed onto here so you can actually see a head-on of both if those are available. So they come up to each other and they are looking at each other now. Now, Izzy does something with his lips, and you can see what Jan does here. In the previous one, it was quite evident. You can look right there in his cheek that he sort of moved his tongue around inside of his mouth. Now, that could be a sign of nervousness. That could be a sign of milling things about, or he could have the intent if he thought about it. And if he, let's face it, these guys do this moment a lot. A lot of totally unconscious behaviors will come up, but totally conscious behaviors do happen. And those behaviors oftentimes are set up as sort of coping mechanisms, because I'm going to do X, Y, and Z here because I don't want to kind of have an unplanned script, because that will leave me to the potential of giving myself away through body language. So we take a look. Jan has a dead stare. From this angle, you can see he's not breaking eye contact. Dana, of course, is very, very interested in their expressions. Israel here, you can see he kind of starts smirking a little bit. And then Jan turns his mouth over and does that mouth thing again. And then he sort of starts smirking and widens his eyes a bit and looks at him again. What Israel says to him right here after he scanned his face, he said, "You got a cut on your eye." And you can only hear that in the video that is taken from the woman in the, I forget who she represents and what company, but that's the one where you can hear that volume on it. And then you can't exactly hear what Jan says right here afterward either. I tried it over and over again. I know that he says "we'll see" when he gets a little bit further. I think he says "that's okay" is what I can make out. But as soon as Israel says "you got a cut on your eye," Jan immediately goes to the smirk. He doesn't get angry. He doesn't get like, "Oh, so what's the big deal?" But he just starts smiling and says it's okay. And it's a really genuine smile, because you can see that like the wrinkles in his eyes, his lips are really upturned. And it was a very, very sudden reaction. So he tells him that it's okay, and then smirks off even more. And Israel was trying to say something else that was illegible after that. And then they break and face forward. Now we're zooming out. Dana here has his hand on Jan's shoulder, and that, I'm thinking, was likely a result of the interaction between Israel and Jan, because if anybody heard what was said in that little area clearly, with all the click, click, clicks of the cameras going off in the audience that aren't necessary in most of those cases. I mean, there's a lot of people that are using DSLRs with real shutters, but it just sounds like there's a lot of electronic click. But I digress. Let's get to the juicy stuff here. So they're coming up with the belt for Izzy. Izzy looks down at his belt and he goes to take it. Dana's finishing brushing his hand off of Jan's sleeve. Jan has a dead serious look, lips together, staring out into the audience as Israel is still taking the belt here. Jan turns, looks over to get his belt, and then he's putting it over his shoulder as Israel is giving the belt back. That's weird. They're both champions. They should both have the belts on the stage. And I thought that kind of straight away. So Jan puts his belt on the shoulder and he is staring out right away. Israel gives it away. And he does this thing where he sort of flips his hands out and then again crosses his hands in front of his body. Now, he may be doing this as a planned, contrived, cool guy pose, but he might be doing it subconsciously as well. We can see he probably notices there's something up about that. Now, Jan, what he's doing is he is almost sucking his lip in. Is he uncomfortable in the mouth? Is he adjusting something? Or is he perhaps really feeling a bit of nervousness in this moment? So there he goes, closes his lip, and now his mouth is a bit crooked, but it's closed as Israel again is doing something with his jacket. Now, what he winds up doing is taking the jacket, adjusting that, and then taking the t-shirt and pulling it down. Now, usually when you're making a lot of those adjustments and discomforts, like if something's uncomfortable and you're nervous, you're going to make a heck of a lot of shifts and clothing adjustments as sort of nervous tics if that's something that you go into. It's also important when looking at people's body language that you have to know what their baseline is. I gesticulate so much and I'm so animated some of the time that I don't know what in the heck people would say about me in certain circumstances. So it's always important to know what the person is like. And we know what Israel's like: very confident, boisterous, self-sure, and he talks about it. So the question is he really feeling that right now, or is it a front? Now, I think it's a bit of a front because the front is the reality to him. He believes in that power of envisioning things and the law of attraction, that you envision it and it comes to be, you manifest your thoughts. But Jan also does to some degree, and that's what the bracelet that he's wearing is about. And there's a long story behind that bracelet and the luck thoughts behind it and where he found it. And this is the first time that Jan actually has it with him. And Jan has talked about his visualizations too. So he actually said he was going to head kick Izzy in the second round, and that was going to do it. Now, Israel knows that Jan has the visualization thing going on too, and he knows that he's been on a tear. So all of a sudden, when your visualizations come up against somebody else's visualizations, well, somebody's are going to have to get in who believes it more. And well, Israel seems to have a lot of faith in himself, but there just seems to be a lot of these fidgety things here that lead me to think, and I'm not necessarily right in this, you're welcome to please put your thoughts in the comments section, that he is just a little bit nervous and aware of the fact that he is putting on the front. It's not coming naturally to him anymore. He's playing Mr. Cool Cat because maybe he actually had to adjust his clothes. It seemed like he was just doing that kind of naturally. And then as a result, he made it look like a cool gesture to do. So here he makes the adjustment. It looks as though in the slow and the frame to frame things, like he might have been doing this to show his shirt for his father. And I think that there is something like that to it, that he might have thought like, all right, when I get on stage, I want to make sure this is seen. So I'll make sure to have my jacket open and this all the way down. Jan right now is in his pose, and that's there. We also need to look at to determine body language. It's not just I come at it from a sociological point of view, and I got it from like a micro-sociology standpoint and looked at things so much like groups and the way they would stand as opposed to other groups versus a single individual. What is threatening, what isn't? Because body language is really important. I mean, you need to know when somebody's walking up on you before they say something, whether that person's friendly or not. So humans are designed from evolutionary 200 years of 200,000 years. That's nothing. That's not 10 generations, 200,000 years to be wired for this stuff. So he straightens his jacket out. Now he's looking down, does that little thing, looking forward again. They're posing here. Here they zoom in to get it. Now Izzy winks and he licks his lips. And then he goes ahead and purses and bites his bottom lip almost at the end of that to carry, because most of the time when people lick their lips, it is a sign of anticipation. Lip licking, hand rubbing shows that you are waiting for something. You are excited that it is going to come. But this was more of a just tongue kind of straight out, not like a licking across the lips. It was almost like it seemed like it could have been a dehydration thing or just something with that. I'm not quite sure what was up exactly with that lick, but it was right after the wink. So maybe he was conscious of himself somehow. But I just found that really interesting. And he does purse his lips, though. What makes me think that it is not a very comfortable lip lick is it doesn't have that cross motion going to it, and it's sort of straight out and such, and he looks almost like he's getting ready to swallow. When people swallow, we know what that usually means, like, uh-oh, something's wrong. And he just seems to look a little bit tight while he's trying to play super cool. Meanwhile, Jan's over there. He puts his hand down. Izzy seems to see that his hand moves in. They say, wait a second. After all, you really should put your belt on. So they hand it to Izzy. Jan goes back to doing it forward. Izzy throws it over his shoulder and gives it a smile. And then again, takes that top lip and sort of bites his bottom lip almost, or really purses it. And that's a self-soothing sort of gesture. So he's doing those types of gestures while he's doing these. I'm going to try to look cool with my belt now as I sling it over the shoulder. And again, flip and adjust that jacket. But if he was comfortable in his jacket, if he was comfortable in his skin, he wouldn't feel the need to adjust it so darn much, I don't think. I guess he put the belt in that might deserve another adjustment. If I'm probably going too deep, let me know if I'm talking too much and I should really stick and keep it a lot more basic in the next videos. We'll see how that goes. So, alrighty. Stands, forward eye contact, fidgets around just a little bit. And I noticed also that he did a lot of eye blinking. Jan looks around. Jan was doing some of that mouth chewing stuff. They look over at each other right quickly. Izzy looked first, if I'm not sure. Or let's see here. About the same time, I think what Izzy saw his hand drop down when he was sort of looking downward in that direction. So Jan looks down as Izzy's putting his hand out, and he goes to take it with the hand that's free because his belt is on his right shoulder. And so Izzy goes from, well, handshake, well, you can't give me your handshake hand. I'll just give you a fist bump. And Jan is like, no, oh, well, maybe I'm full on. I'm going to be the gentleman. I mixed that frame in there. I saved an extra one so he doesn't actually like go back and forth. Sorry about that. It's my first time. We're on the process toward this greatness. But for our first episode, we're tongue-in-cheek as hell. So he shakes his hand. Jan has a very genuine, hard smile going on. Israel he was the first one to put his hand out, and he has a very standard smile. I know we have to go through this, etc. Jan seems to be interacting in this handshake like he knows something that Izzy doesn't, and that's why he's got the extra smile, and he seems almost super glad that Israel was the one who offered him the hand. And I think that that's probably got to do with the fact that earlier Israel said to him that thing about you got a cut on your eye before he went over there. So, the guy that told me I've got a cut is now offering me his hand first after he tried to be a little bit snarky. I see this. Why would you be smiling? if you were in that situation? Think about that, and that's usually a good thing because people are wired very, very similarly. So they turn. Israel then turns away very, very quickly. Israel's the first one to turn away, just like he was the first one to offer the hand. I was thinking earlier about this. I knew Israel was the first to turn away in one of those situations. So here he turns away first, as you see me madly gesticulating in the window very quickly. And he goes over. And then this is parts of another video that had that in there. So what do I make of the overall picture of the Israel-Jan face-off? Well, generally, I feel that Jan, especially, you got to look also at I was starting to say about the group stuff, where the way people are dressed also speaks volumes, especially when they know what the occasion is going to be. And Jan was in the suit. Israel was in the pair of sweatpants with the graphics on the side, the Adesanya shirt, and the big winter jacket looking thing. So he wasn't very formal at all. He was doing Izzy, and Izzy is there. He's a fighter. Jan, it's a big occasion for him. This is the biggest fight of his life. Imagine what it's going to be like if and when he beats Israel Adesanya. And then Israel goes and does whatever the heck he's going to do in the future. And it's going to be amazing. But then what would that say about Jan? And I think he's very well aware of that, although he's not trying to make it huge in his mind. I'm going to do in the future, I'm going to see if I have time to add tomorrow the psychology of some of the interviews that these guys had, that their coaches had, and some of the giveaways that may have slipped by, or maybe they were nothing at all. What's important to look for is to look for bundles and piles and coincidentals and clusters, and just not just one or two of these things in isolation that happen, but is there a pattern to either a person's body language, to the certain words that they're choosing when they're talking about what's going to happen, what might happen, what I'm going to do, what I'm going to try to do, and how does that fit with what they've said before and what's happened before and what the expectations have been. So what do I see out of this? Jan was pretty much business, recognizing the formality of the situation. Izzy was doing him. He was trying to be Mr. Cool Cat, but he seemed a little bit nervous in the process, and it seemed like he was just trying to front a bit too much. It seemed to me previously that even though he talks kind of and inflates himself, and he's very, very definitely has an ego and is very self-driven like that, that he doesn't seem to have to put on the airs as much. And in the body language thing specifically here, I kind of picked up on that. Now with Jan, I did pick up a little bit of the shiftiness, the tongue moving around in the mouth in there. And that could be a sign of nervousness, but I'm confused because that is also juxtaposed right next to these big smiles and going in for the handshake. And he could have just done the fist bump. The other thing is, when that hand was out there, Israel saw that bracelet and was reminded of, oh, well, that's one of Jan's visualization, believe in luck things. He's got his charms with him. I'm surprised if he knew it was there earlier that he wouldn't have said something like, your bracelet's not going to help you. So we'll see how it goes. Nonetheless, I hope you found this informative and interesting. And if you stayed here all the way with me through it, with my long-windedness on this first attempt, congratulations. I appreciate the heck out of your time. Please click the like and subscribe buttons for a lot more of these videos that I will get a lot deeper into, but be much more clear and concise. I'm trying to fit all the little stuff in on this one because it's the first one and I want to be super clear. So I'm over explaining myself, but I will do better next time. Again, thank you so much. Hope to see you in another video. Hope to see you in another video. Cheers and farewell. I almost made it all the way through without fumbling on my mouth. Take care.